My wife slept with my school bully, so now they received a punch from me that they'll never forget. Here I am sitting in the county courtroom at the defense table. My lawyer is beside me, a stoic presence, as we wait for the jury to be called in. Just moments ago, he leaned over, his voice low but serious, reminding me of the stakes. If they convict me, if those 12 strangers decide against me, I could be looking at several years behind bars. Years stolen from my life. But I stand by what I did. Honestly, I felt like I had no other option. Okay, maybe I went a bit overboard, got carried away in the heat of the moment, but put yourself in my shoes. What would you have done to make any sense of why I'm sitting here today, accused of a serious crime? I guess I need to rewind. You need the backstory, the context to understand the path that led me to this courtroom. It starts as many stories do with love, or what I thought was love. My wife Rose and I found each other a bit later than most couples, I suppose. She was 32 and I was 34 when we tied the knot. Rose. She was and still is stunning. A classic blonde beauty, the kind that stops you in your tracks. I was completely smitten from the moment I first laid eyes on her. It wasn't exactly smooth sailing at first. We had a few rocky months finding our rhythm, but eventually we started dating seriously. I knew she was the one, or at least I convinced myself she was. We got married the following year. Both of us had been through other relationships, bumps and bruises along the way, and I figured that our maturity, having been around the block a few times, would actually be a strength for our marriage. And for the first 3 years, it seemed like I was right. Things were good. Rose didn't work. She preferred staying home. We often talked about starting a family, having kids, and since she seemed content not pursuing a career, I didn't push the issue. Financially, we were comfortable. I was doing well enough as a design engineer to support us both, and the thought of having children excited me. It made sense to me that she wouldn't start a career only to put it on hold for raising a family. Rose had this incredibly upbeat, outgoing personality. She could light up a room, but sometimes that same quality created problems. She was naturally friendly, maybe even a little flirtatious without meaning to be, and a lot of men misinterpreted her openness. They thought she was hitting on them. More than once, I found myself on the verge of a fight because some guy got the wrong idea. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if Rose enjoyed creating those situations, maybe testing me, trying to provoke some kind of jealous reaction. But it never worked. I absolutely hated fighting. Confrontation wasn't my style. I always tried my best to avoid it, to just turn the other cheek. That aversion to conflict, that tendency to withdraw from a fight or a challenge, was a core part of who I was, right up until about 2 months ago. It wasn't because I was a wimp, despite what some people, maybe even Rose herself, believed. It stemmed from something deeper advice my dad gave me when I was young, and a harsh lesson I learned about my own temper. My childhood was pretty normal until we moved to the city where I live now. Leaving my old town was tough. I had to say goodbye to my friends, my teachers, everything familiar and comfortable. I was in 8th grade, just hitting those awkward teenage years, and the new school felt enormous, overwhelming, and frankly a little dangerous. I tried to put on a brave face for my dad. He was having a hard enough time as it was. My mom had passed away 2 years prior, and he was still grieving while trying to make ends meet. The move was a financial necessity. He didn't have a choice. I didn't want him to feel guilty about uprooting me, so I kept my struggles to myself initially, but trouble found me almost immediately. On my very first day, as I was heading for the school bus, a massive figure blocked my path. I hadn't even noticed him until I felt a hard shove that sent me sprawling onto the ground. Looking up, dizzy and confused, I saw this giant looming over me. He must have been 6'2", a veritable monster compared to my scrawny 5'3" frame back then. For the record, I'm about 5'7" now, weighing a solid 185 pounds. He wasn't alone. 2 equally large buddies flanked him. "Get up," the monster commanded. "Give us your backpack and any money you got." My heart hammered against my ribs. I slowly, shakily got to my feet. I have never before or since felt that terrified. So scared, in fact, that the unthinkable happened. I wet my pants. Humiliating, yes, but in hindsight, that moment of sheer terror probably saved me from a serious beating right then and there. "What's your name, wimp?" the big guy sneered, his voice dripping with malice. His name I soon learned was Tommy Ballinger, and he seemed to take an instant dislike to me, the new kid. "Pete Huckey," I stammered, my voice trembling. Tommy let out a cruel laugh. Well, Rose dear," he mocked, using my future wife's name sarcastically, though obviously he didn't know her then. Looks like you just got yourself a new school nickname. From now on, you're Pissy Pete. Hey everyone, he yelled to the crowd that had gathered, drawn by the commotion. Get a load of Pissy Pete. He just wet his pants like a little baby. Laughter erupted around me. Every face seemed to be mocking me. The shame and fear were unbearable. I turned and ran, abandoning any thought of the bus, sprinting all the way home in sheer terror. That day marked the beginning of a nightmare. Tommy Ballinger never let up. He was a junior, so I had him tormenting me for 2 long years until he finally graduated. My life became a living hell. No girl would even look at me who wanted to date Pissy Pete. That humiliating nickname stuck like glue no matter what I did. Every day felt like walking into a war zone. I was constantly picked on, shoved around, sometimes beaten up, just generally abused and degraded. I always thought of myself as a decent guy, but the way I was treated made me question everything. I counted down the days praying for Tommy to graduate. He seemed to relish inflicting misery. He was a master of terror, and I was his favorite target. He showed zero compassion, not just to me, but to anyone he perceived as weaker. Finally, Tommy did graduate. School settled down somewhat after he left. By the time I was a senior, only a few lingering jerks still called me Pissy Pete. I focused on my studies, burying myself in books, and managed to graduate with honors, even becoming the valedictorian of my class. I went on to a good college and eventually became a design engineer. During those awful first couple of years, I did try to talk to my dad about the bullying just once. He immediately got protective, saying he'd march down to the school and sort things out. That was the last thing I wanted. The thought of my dad intervening, trying to fight my battles, felt mortifying. I knew it wouldn't actually help. It would probably just make the bullying worse, give Tommy more ammunition. So I quickly backtracked, telling Dad I'd give it a few more days, see if things calmed down on their own. He accepted that, thankfully. When he asked about school a few days later, I lied and said things were better. The truth was, school remained an unpleasant experience, but I dealt with it silently. About 2 months into that miserable first year at the new school, I came home after a particularly brutal day. I was wound tighter than a drum, simmering with frustration and helpless anger. My little brother Billy, he's my only sibling and smaller than me, did something minor, took something of mine. I can't even recall what it was now. All I knew was that he was suddenly in my path, an outlet for all the pent-up rage I couldn't direct at Tommy and his goons. We started arguing. Dad was in the next room, probably reading the paper. Suddenly, all the bullying, the humiliation, the feeling of powerlessness, it all boiled over. I snapped. I shoved Billy hard against the wall, my fist drawn back, aimed right at his head. In that split second, he ducked. My fist connected not with him, but with the wall behind him. We lived in an older house with plaster walls and wooden slats. My punch, fueled by uncontrolled fury, tore a 3-foot hole clean through the plaster and even splintered 2 of the wooden boards right where Billy's head had been moments before. Dad rushed into the room, his eyes wide with shock as he took in the scene. The gaping hole in the wall, Billy crying hysterically. "You could have killed your brother," he roared, his voice shaking with a mixture of fear and anger. "In your room right now, you are grounded for the next 2 months. Those 2 months felt like an eternity. Grounded at home, still facing the daily torment at school. But more than the punishment, it was the terrifying realization of what I had almost done that stuck with me. My father's words echoed in my head. My temper could get me into serious trouble, potentially kill someone. Deep down, I knew if my fist had connected with Billy, the consequences could have been unthinkable. That incident, that raw, uncontrolled explosion of violence, became a defining moment. It taught me a profound lesson about the danger lurking within my own anger, and that's why, for all these years, I've chosen to walk away to avoid conflict at all costs. Better to be seen as passive, even a wimp, than to risk unleashing that beast again. So that's the background, the foundation of who I was before everything changed again, starting about 3 months ago. So that brings me to about 3 months ago. I had this routine where I'd usually call Rose from work just before my lunch break. She'd have lunch ready for me when I got home. It was convenient. The drive was only about 20 minutes each way, perfect for my 1-hour break. But on this particular day, things were hectic at the office, and I completely forgot to call ahead. I just drove home expecting things to be normal. When I walked through the front door, the first thing I saw was Rose on her hands and knees in the living room, furiously scrubbing at our carpet. And right there, stark against the light color, was a trail of muddy footprints. big ones. Looked like size 13s, maybe even bigger. The tracks led straight from the front door right across the living room and towards our bedroom at the back of the apartment. Rose, what happened? Who made this mess all over the new rug? I asked, trying to keep the annoyance out of my voice. We'd just gotten that rug and it was white of all colors. She looked up, maybe a little flustered, but quickly composed herself. "Oh, Pete, it was that new guy Leo hired," she explained, gesturing vaguely. "You know the building superintendent. He sent the new guy over to check the smoke alarms, and the idiot walked right in with muddy feet. Didn't even bother to wipe them." Her explanation sounded, well, almost rehearsed, a little too smooth. "Okay," I said, frowning. "But seriously, Leo knows better than that. We have white rugs. I'm going to have a word with him the next chance I get." "No, don't worry about it, Peter." Rose cut in quickly, maybe a bit too quickly. "I'll handle it. I'll talk to Leo. Just let me take care of it." She seemed insistent, so I dropped it. I ate the lunch she'd prepared and tried to put the muddy tracks out of my mind. A few days later, maybe a week, I happened to see Leo emerging from one of the other apartment buildings in our complex. Perfect timing. I waved him over. "Hey, Leo, how's it going?" I started casually. "Feels like it's been a while since we chatted." And we talked about the usual stuff, sports, the weather, for a minute or two, and then I remembered the rug incident. "Listen, Leo," I said, shifting gears. "The other day, that new guy you hired, he came by to check the smoke alarms in my place and tracked mud all over our white rug. Rose had a heck of a time cleaning it up." Leo's friendly expression immediately soured. "Whoa, hold on, Pete," he said, a clear note of annoyance in his voice. "First off, he is not my new guy." And he paused, taking a breath, as if trying to control his temper. "Sorry, Pete, but that guy, he's already gotten under my skin. And trust me, it usually takes a lot to bother me. His name's Tom something. Starts with a B, I think Ballinger, I don't know." My blood ran cold for a second. Ballinger, could it be? No, surely not. Just a coincidence. Leo continued oblivious to my internal alarm bells. Corporate hired him directly after I told them I needed more help. Supposed to be my part-time guy, you know, doing the tasks I assign him. But this jerk walks in on day one, acting like he's the boss. Starts telling me how things are going to work, laying out schedules for both of us. Can you believe it? Leo was clearly worked up now. I had to set him straight about his actual role, and let me tell you, he wasn't happy about it. Guy's got these wild eyes, Pete, like he could snap at any second. Honestly, I was tempted to tell him to hit the road right then and there, but seeing that look, I genuinely thought if I fired him, he might actually try to beat me up, maybe worse. He's a big dude, supposed to be handy with tools, but if you ask me, he's just a world-class jerk. I'm planning to call corporate and get them to handle firing him. He shook his head in disgust. Besides Pete, he added, his voice firm, I checked the smoke detectors in your apartment myself about 3 weeks ago. I even told Rose that the two in the back needed new batteries. I came back later and installed them for her myself. Tom, or whatever his name is, had absolutely no reason to be in your apartment checking smoke alarms. That's not even his job. His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Why would Rose lie about who made the mess and why they were there? After talking to Leo, I felt a knot of unease tighten in my stomach, but life got busy and somehow I let it slide. It slipped my mind, pushed aside by work and daily routines. Until a few weeks later, when another strange thing happened. I was looking for a specific pair of sneakers, ones I usually kept under the bed. As I reached under Rose's side, my hand brushed against something on the carpet. I pulled back and looked. There, partially hidden in the shadows, were another set of muddy shoe prints. Size 13, just like the ones Rose had cleaned up weeks before. But these weren't just tracks leading somewhere. These were the distinct impressions left by shoes that had been placed there, taken off by whoever wore them. It looked exactly like where someone would kick off their shoes before getting into bed. My wife sometimes did that with my shoes out of habit, placing them neatly under the bed. These prints looked deliberately placed, and they were the only tracks, like she'd cleaned everything else but missed these. The unease returned stronger this time. Then, on the very same day, I went to get some clean socks from my dresser drawer. Mixed in with my own socks, I found a pair that definitely weren't mine. They were huge, easily size 13, in a color I would never buy. Just for kicks, I tried one on. It swallowed my foot. It might have been funny under different circumstances, but thinking about how someone else's massive socks ended up folded neatly in my sock drawer, that wasn't funny at all. The implications started swirling in my head, dark and unsettling. My anxiety ratcheted up another notch. A few days after that, thanks to my neighbor, Mrs. Adams, Sally we called her. She lived right across the hall and was the building's unofficial gossip queen, always knew everything that was going on. One morning, as I was leaving for work, she caught me in the hallway. "Peter," she started lowering her voice conspiratorially, "is your apartment all fixed up yet?" I had no idea what she was talking about. "Fix, Sally?" I asked, confused. "I didn't know anything was broken." "Oh," she said, raising her eyebrows slightly. "It's just, well, that new big fella, the fix-it guy, he seemed to be over at your place an awful lot, always fixing things." Yeah, she paused, giving me a look loaded with meaning. "You should probably ask your wife about it." Her expression, that knowing, pitying look, said far more than her words. Sally might have been a busybody, but she wasn't malicious. This felt like her way of giving me a warning, telling me to open my eyes. Honestly, the seeds of doubt about Rose's faithfulness had been planted even before the muddy footprints and the neighbors' comments. For several months, little things had felt off. Nothing I could put my finger on, just small inconsistencies. Sometimes, if I happened to answer the phone, the caller would abruptly hang up. A couple of times when she came home, I thought I caught the faint scent of men's cologne clinging to her clothes, definitely not my brand. I had confronted her about it directly one day, asking if there was someone else. She looked me straight in the eye, completely calm, no hint of nervousness, and told me I was her one and only love. Her denial seemed so genuine, so convincing that I chose to believe her. I pushed my suspicions down, telling myself I was being paranoid. Maybe I should have pressed harder, demanded more answers, but I didn't. Part of me desperately wanted to trust her to believe in the life we had built. Looking back now, reading this over, Rose might think, wow, he really was a dumb butt. And maybe she's right. In my defense, I truly loved her, or at least the woman I thought she was. I trusted her implicitly. Yes, I was blinded by love, but there was another layer to it too. Deep down, buried beneath the love and trust, was that old aversion to confrontation. I didn't want to know the truth if it meant facing an ugly reality, potentially triggering that anger I worked so hard to keep locked away. So I accepted her denials and tried to ignore the warning signs. And that's how things stayed simmering beneath the surface until the day my entire world came crashing down. Yes, maybe I was love blind. Maybe I subconsciously avoided the confrontation I knew would break my heart and unleash something I feared within myself. Whatever the reason, I let things slide, burying my head in the sand. That is, until the day avoidance was no longer an option, the day my life irrevocably changed. It started mundanely enough. I was at work feeling under the weather, kind of nauseous and achy. It got bad enough that I decided to pack it in early, well before my usual lunch break. Driving home, I just wanted to crawl into bed. I walked into my apartment expecting quiet, expecting Rose to be surprised to see me home so early. But the apartment wasn't quiet. As soon as I closed the door behind me, I knew something was deeply wrong. Our apartment layout is simple, a one-story unit with the bedroom tucked away at the back. You usually can't hear anything from the front door if someone's back there, but today I could hear sounds, voices. As I started walking down the hallway towards the bedroom, the voices became clearer. I heard Rose moaning loudly, and then a man's voice, smug and crude. "God, your privates feels amazing," he was saying. "I can't believe your husband is such a fool he doesn't know what's going on. If you were my wife, I'd keep you locked up whenever I left. A private like yours, 1 in a million. And damn, you give the best head I've ever had. Seriously, you could suck a golf ball through a garden hose." He chuckled darkly. My blood turned to ice. I knew instantly what was happening, the betrayal hitting me like a physical blow. Any lingering love or affection I felt for Rose evaporated in that single sickening moment. But the real gut punch, the thing that started the slow burn of rage deep inside me, came when I recognized the man's voice and when Rose responded. "Tommy, please just screw my brains out already," Rose urged him, her voice breathy. "I don't want my husband catching us. He might come home for lunch." Tommy. The name echoed in my ears, dragging up a flood of horrific memories. No, it couldn't be him. "Who cares, Rose?" The voice, Tommy's voice, scoffed. "You told me yourself he's a wimp." Never puts up a fight. If he walks in, I'll just kick the crap out of him. Then I'll screw you again while he's lying on the floor watching us." Hearing him say that, hearing the casual brutality in his tone was bad enough. But then Rose replied, attempting a weak defense of me. "I don't want to hurt him," she said, sounding less than convincing. "He is passive, but he's actually a good guy. Sort of." Sort of. Those two words, the hesitation in her voice, the implication that she didn't really believe I was a good guy, that she saw me exactly as Tommy did, a coward, a wimp, that cut deeper than the betrayal itself. There are no words to describe the crushing weight of that realization, knowing the woman who shared my bed, the woman I loved, held me in such low regard. To this day, the next few seconds are a blur. Instinct took over. Just as I reached the bedroom door, which was slightly ajar, I fumbled in my pocket and switched on the tiny digital recorder I carried. It's smaller than a cigarette lighter, easily concealed. I'd started carrying it for work, actually. My new boss, Bill, had this nasty habit of stealing my design ideas and passing them off as his own during meetings, making me look incompetent, while he looked brilliant. A friend suggested I record our conversations to protect myself, to have proof of his backstabbing. Bill, much like Tommy, clearly assumed I was just some passive pushover he could walk all over. Little did I know the recorder would capture something far more damaging than office politics. With the recorder silently capturing audio and video from my shirt pocket, I pushed the bedroom door fully open. And there he was. Tommy Ballinger, my high school tormentor, naked, on my bed, screwing my wife from behind. That image is burned into my memory, a permanent scar on my mind. The sheer shock of it held me frozen in the doorway for a moment. My wife, the woman I had vowed to love and cherish, being violated by the one person on earth I despised more than anyone. Hatred cold and pure washed over me. Hatred for Rose and an incandescent hatred for Tommy. I just stood there numb, watching him pump away, degrading her, degrading me, degrading everything I thought my life was. Then something snapped. The numbness gave way to pure, unadulterated rage. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I roared, my voice filled with more fury than I'd ever heard come out of my own mouth. "Get out! Get out of my apartment! Both of you!" The look on my face must have been terrifying because even Tommy paused. Rose turned her head startled for maybe a split second, but then her expression shifted into something astonishingly defiant, almost a sneer. "So what?" her look seemed to say. "You're not going to do anything about it anyway, wimp. You never do." Tommy just looked at me, a slow, mocking grin spreading across his face. He started to laugh, a harsh, ugly sound. "Carrie," he said, apparently using a pet name for Rose. Don't tell me you actually married Pissy Pete." He laughed even harder, shaking his head in disbelief. Rose looked confused. "Pissy Pete?" "Yeah," Tommy sneered, glancing back at me with contempt. "Your loser husband here went to my high school. First time we ever met, tough guy here pissed his pants right in front of everybody." He conveniently left out the part where he and his thugs had cornered and threatened me, of course, just sharing the most humiliating detail to demean me in front of my own wife. And it worked. I saw the flicker of disgust in Rose's eyes as she looked at me as if seeing me clearly for the first time as something less than a man. Tommy pulled himself out of her, still grinning. "Tell you what, Pissy Pete," he said, his voice dripping with menace as he started to get off the bed. "I'm gonna finish screwing your wife, her privates, her buttocks, her mouth. Let a real man show you how it's done. You just wait outside like a good little wimp until I'm finished, then you can have the leftovers." He actually gave me an order in my own home. Rose just watched, her eyes darting between us, saying nothing. In that moment, any last shred of connection I felt to her was severed. We were done. Today was the end. "Oh, and by the way, Pissy Pete," Tommy added, pausing as he stood up completely naked and arrogant. "Technically, I'm on the clock right now, doing building maintenance. You know my paycheck comes partly from the rent you pay, so congratulations, you're literally paying me to screw your wife right now." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a taunting whisper. "How's that feel, you little piece of crap?" He turned back towards Rose as if intending to resume, but I wasn't having it. All the years of swallowed anger, of turning the other cheek, of being Pissy Pete, it all culminated in this moment. "I'll say this one more time," I yelled, my voice shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer force of the rage building inside me. "Get out of my apartment now." I braced myself ready for whatever he threw at me. I was done running. Tommy turned back, a look of almost comical surprise on his face. "Well, well," he drawled sarcastically. "Looks like Pissy Pete finally grew a pair of balls." He took a step towards me, blocking the doorway, his fists clenching. "Shouldn't have done that. I gave you a chance to walk away, wimp. Now I'm gonna give you a beating you won't ever forget. Even worse than high school." Tommy stood there naked and menacing in my bedroom doorway, threatening me with a beating. It's funny, isn't it? You run into someone from your past, especially someone like Tommy, and they automatically assume you're the exact same person they knew years ago. Tommy looked at me and still saw Pissy Pete, the scared little kid he used to push around. That was his first and biggest mistake. What Tommy didn't know, what even Rose didn't know, was that the Pete Hucky standing before him wasn't the same terrified 8th grader. After high school, during college, one of my professors noticed I was, well, lacking in self-confidence. He gently suggested I try taking up martial arts, thought it might boost my self-esteem. I was skeptical, but I gave it a shot. And surprisingly, I found I had an aptitude for it. More than that, I developed a real interest, a passion even. I started training seriously, judo, kickboxing, various forms of karate. For the past 6 years, I'd kept up a pretty rigorous routine, hitting the kickboxing club twice a week for sparring and drills, and heading to the gym at least once a week for strength and conditioning. Rose never came with me, never asked much about it. She probably just assumed I was sweating it out on a Stairmaster or something equally mundane. She had no idea I was sparring regularly, learning how to handle myself. Initially, getting me to spar was a challenge for my instructors. Every time I squared off against someone, I'd see my little brother Billy's terrified face, that image from years ago when I almost lost control and punched him. That memory was a powerful deterrent. My teachers tried reasoning with me. One told me, learning martial arts without sparring is like learning to read, but never actually picking up a book. That analogy stuck with me. Eventually, I pushed past the fear, started sparring, and discovered I was actually pretty good. My instructors often said my real strength wasn't raw power, but speed. I could move quickly, react fast, and throw a surprisingly mean punch when I needed to, though. I always tried to pull it, never intending to seriously hurt my sparring partners. But standing there facing Tommy Ballinger in my own bedroom, the past came rushing back with violent force. For a terrifying split second, the old fear resurfaced. That little boy, terrorized by the bully, was still in there somewhere screaming at me to run. But something else, something stronger was boiling up alongside it. Years of suppressed anger, humiliation, and rage finally bursting forth like a pressure cooker exploding. Tommy, blinded by arrogance and his outdated image of me, lunged first. He threw a powerful right hook aiming for my head, but to me, trained to anticipate and react, he seemed to be moving in slow motion. It was almost laughably easy. I shifted slightly to my right, letting his fist sail harmlessly past my face. He completely missed, and in that instant of his failed attack, his momentum carrying him forward, I saw my opening. I didn't hesitate. As his arm was extended, I moved in using a technique I'd practiced countless times. I sharply pushed up on the back of his elbow while simultaneously striking down hard on the top of his wrist and hand. The leverage was perfect. There was a sickening crack that echoed in the small room. His elbow had snapped. Tommy roared in pain, clutching his now useless arm, but fueled by adrenaline and fury, he wasn't done. He tried to lunge at me again, using his good arm and his sheer body weight to try and tackle me. Big mistake. I simply stepped aside again, using his own momentum against him, and guided his entire weight, all 250 pounds or whatever he was, straight into the solid wood door frame I'd been standing near moments before. His head connected with the frame with another sickening crunch. From the bed, Rose started screaming, pulling the covers up higher, only her wide, terrified eyes visible. I ignored her completely. My focus was entirely on the threat in front of me. Amazingly, Tommy pushed himself off the doorframe and staggered upright again. I had to give him points for toughness, but none for brains. He should have stayed down. Seeing him still trying to come at me, I moved back towards the center of the room, giving myself more space to maneuver. If he'd been standing fully upright, I doubt my leg could have reached his head, given his height advantage. But he was slightly hunched over, still reeling from the impact with the doorframe. That was all the opening I needed. I spun quickly, putting all my weight and training into the hardest roundhouse kick I'd ever thrown. My foot, clad in my hard-soled wingtip dress shoe, connected squarely with his jaw. I felt several of his teeth give way, saw blood spray from his mouth. He screamed again, a garbled, bloody sound, instinctively bringing his one good hand up to his shattered mouth. That split-second reaction gave me another opportunity. While he was bent over in pain, I drove my knee upwards with full force into his chest. I felt more than heard several of his ribs crack under the impact. This was getting ridiculous. I decided I'd had enough of this nonsense. With a quick, sharp sweep of my leg against his, I took his feet out from under him. He crashed heavily to the floor. One of my instructors always drilled into us, "If you take an enemy down, keep him down." I took that advice to heart. As Tommy lay there groaning on the floor, I jumped with all my weight, all 185 pounds of it, landing squarely on both of his ankles. I felt at least one of them snap. He was still naked, completely vulnerable. I delivered several precise, brutal kicks to his groin. My fancy dress shoes weren't designed for this, but they did the job. I could practically feel things squish under the impact. He was moaning pitifully now, curled up on the floor. But I wasn't finished. I stepped back, took a short run, and drop-kicked him hard in the side of the head. The room fell silent then, except for Tommy's low, gasping moans. Even then, a cold, vengeful part of me surfaced. I couldn't resist the urge to give him a matching set. I deliberately broke his remaining good arm in 2 places. Then, just to make absolutely sure he wouldn't be getting up anytime soon, I jumped hard on both of his kneecaps. Seeing him incapacitated like that, broken and bleeding on my bedroom floor, it actually made me feel better. A lot better. Now that's adding insult to injury. I muttered more to myself than to him before delivering one final solid kick to the side of his head. His eyes rolled back and he finally passed out. What I did might sound cruel, excessively violent, and maybe it was. But all I could think about was the Tommy Ballinger I knew, the bully, who never showed anyone mercy, who never gave anyone a break, who seemed to live only to inflict pain and fear. He was a complete and utter jerk, an enemy of the worst kind. In my mind, at that moment, he deserved everything he got, and I felt absolutely no remorse for treating him accordingly. When I finally looked over at the bed, Rose was staring at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of raw fear and bewildered awe. In all the years she'd known me, I'd never so much as raised my voice in anger towards her, let alone raised a hand to anyone. Even when other guys had hit on her, right in front of me guys, I probably could have handled. I'd always walked away. Now I understood why she might have done that, testing me, wanting to see if I'd fight for her. She genuinely thought I was a wimp. Well, judging by the look on her face, now seeing me systematically dismantle a man 8 inches taller and 100 pounds heavier than me, she definitely didn't think that anymore. I walked slowly towards the bed, my breathing still ragged, adrenaline still pumping. "Every time you flirted with those guys right in front of me," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "I knew what you were doing. That time at the downtown bar, that ape you were draped all over, I could have taken him, Rose. But I walked away. You want to know why?" She just stared silent, trembling. "Because a real man," I continued, leaning closer, "knows when to walk away. A real man understands the damage he can do and chooses not to. A real man learns to control his temper." I thought back to Billy, to the hole in the wall. When I was younger, I almost killed my little brother in a fit of rage. I learned my lesson that day. Controlling that anger, that's what being a man is about. Not like that piece of crap lying on the floor. I gestured towards Tommy's unconscious form. "You made the classic mistake, Rose," I said, my voice hardening. "You should never ever confuse kindness with weakness." My gaze met hers, cold and unforgiving. "I always treated you with love and respect, but that time is over. Forever. You're a cheater, Rose, and I want you out of my life. Pack your things. Once I leave here, I don't want to see you in this apartment ever again. I don't care where you go or what you do, but if I find you here..." I let the threat hang in the air, the image of what I'd just done to Tommy far more effective than any words. She just looked at me, those big saucer eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Without another word, without even a backward glance at her, I turned and walked out of the bedroom, out of the apartment. I wouldn't touch her. Not after Tommy Ballinger had put his filthy hands, his filthiness in her. Never again. I walked out of that apartment, leaving the wreckage of my marriage and Tommy Ballinger's unconscious body behind me, without looking back. For some strange reason, maybe seeking normalcy or just needing a place to go that wasn't there, I drove back to work. It felt more like home at that moment than my actual home did. I wasn't there long. Maybe half an hour passed before two police officers walked into the office. They headed straight for my desk. Apparently someone, Rose I assumed, had called them. Word travels fast, especially gossip about the quiet design engineer suddenly beating a guy twice his size into pulp and sending him to the emergency room. The officers informed me I was under arrest for assault. As they handcuffed me and started leading me out, we passed my boss Bill's office. He was standing in his doorway watching with a smug look on his face. Seeing him remembering his backstabbing and theft of my ideas fueled the rage still simmering just below the surface. I paused, looked him dead in the eye, and said, my voice low and menacing, "You're next, you backstabbing piece of crap. I'll be back for you." The terrified look that flashed across his face, likely spurred by the already circulating rumors about what I'd done to the big guy, was grimly satisfying. I spent the rest of the day downtown, processed, and held in a cell. It wasn't pleasant, but my mind was oddly calm, numb even. Late in the afternoon, a good friend came through and posted my bail. The first thing I did after being released, I went straight back to the office. I figured I was already in deep trouble, might as well clean house completely. I was fully prepared to confront Bill, maybe not physically, but definitely to expose him. But when I got there, his office was empty. I asked around and was told he'd abruptly quit that afternoon, packed his things, and left without saying goodbye. Apparently, my threat combined with the rumors had been enough to send him running. Good riddance. Almost immediately, I was summoned to the office of the company president, Mike. I walked in expecting the worst, maybe getting fired on the spot. I sat down ready to face the music. "Peter," Mike began, his expression serious but not unkind. "I admire your work, I really do. But you understand, I can't have my employees going around beating people up and threatening other staff members." I took a deep breath and laid it all out for him. I told him everything. About coming home, finding Rose with Tommy Ballinger, the history with Tommy, the confrontation. I also told him about Bill, how he'd been stealing my designs and ideas for months, actively sabotaging me in meetings. I even have recordings to prove it. I added, gesturing towards my pocket where the recorder had been. Mike listened patiently, his expression unreadable at first. But then, as I finished, a slow smile spread across his face. "Peter," he said, leaning back in his chair, "I always suspected you had a strong backbone hidden under that quiet exterior. As for Bill, let's just say he was a jerk, and frankly, his departure was overdue. You actually did me a favor," he chuckled. "You think I didn't know what he was doing, taking credit for your work? Please. You're the only designer here who consistently comes up with 3 distinct, fully costed-out design options, complete with material and labor estimates, even for budget-conscious clients. When Bill started presenting your unique concepts as his own, I knew immediately he was a liar and a thief. It was only a matter of time before I dealt with him." He leaned forward again, his smile widening. "Look, here's the name and number of my personal lawyer," he said, scribbling on a notepad and handing it to me. "He's damn good. He should be able to help you out both with this assault charge and with the inevitable divorce from Rose. Get this mess sorted out. Stay out of jail. When it's all over, provided you're a free man, your job, no a better job, will be waiting for you right here. Until then, you need to lay low, stay away from the office while the legal stuff plays out." He paused, a mischievous glint in his eye. "One question, Peter, off the record. Did you really kick the crap out of this big guy who was sleeping with your wife?" I couldn't help but laugh, the tension finally breaking. "Yeah, Mike, I did," I admitted. "But honestly, it only took about 2 minutes. Wasn't much of a workout." "Okay, Peter," he said, shaking his head with another laugh. "Good luck. Keep me updated." We shook hands, and I left his office feeling a strange mix of relief and apprehension. I went back to my apartment. It was eerily empty. Rose was gone. She'd taken all her clothes, her toiletries, her personal belongings. Anything that marked her presence had vanished. Strangely, I didn't feel much. Not sadness, not anger, just emptiness. Then a sudden panic hit me. The recorder, I rushed into the bedroom, my eyes scanning the floor near where the fight had happened. And there it was, lying near the dresser, its tiny light still blinking. It had been recording the entire time, even after it got knocked out of my pocket. Which brings me back to where I started this story, sitting in this courtroom waiting for 12 strangers to decide my fate, waiting to find out where I'd be eating lunch for the next 6 to 10 years. I braced myself for the worst. I didn't really expect to be acquitted. Let's be honest, I had really messed Tommy up. The prosecutor read out the charges: assault with intent to do great bodily harm, aggravated battery, a bunch of other legal terms that basically translated to, you kicked his butt 7 ways from Sunday. Then they read the list of Tommy's injuries. It was extensive. Listening to it, even I was a little taken aback by the sheer damage I'd inflicted. Starting from the top, a large cut on his head, requiring stitches, punctured eardrum concussion, broken jaw, multiple missing teeth, both upper and lower, apparently a broken shoulder, 2 broken arms, multiple fractures in one, a broken wrist, 7 broken ribs, 1 ruptured testicle, yikes, 2 shattered kneecaps, 1 broken leg, 1 broken ankle, 1 severely sprained ankle, and 4 broken toes. Every time they wheeled him into the courtroom, he looked like a mummy, completely bandaged up, confined to a wheelchair. I should have felt some pity, some remorse seeing him like that, but I searched within myself and found nothing. This man, Tommy Ballinger, deserved no sympathy from me. Sometimes during the proceedings, I'd catch myself thinking of him by the new nickname I'd mentally given him, Toothless Tommy. I quickly suppressed the smirk, trying my best to look serious and composed for the jury. Throughout the trial, I could see the jury struggling. They looked at me, 5'7", 185 pounds, a respectable design engineer. And then they looked at the broken heap that was Tommy Ballinger, formerly a 6'3", imposing figure. It was hard for them to reconcile the image of me with the sheer violence of the outcome. Finally, the trial concluded. Deliberations didn't take as long as my lawyer thought they might. Now the jury was filing back in, their faces unreadable. They took their seats. The foreman remained standing. The bailiff called the court to order. The judge looked at the foreman. "Mr. Foreman, has the jury reached a verdict?" "Yes, we have, Your Honor," the foreman replied, his voice clear and steady. He held up the verdict form. My heart pounded against my ribs. This was it. The foreman cleared his throat and addressed the court. "On all charges, we find the defendant not guilty." The words hung in the air for a beat, and then the courtroom erupted. Gasps, murmurs, shuffling sounds. My lawyer clapped me on the shoulder, grinning. I just sat there stunned, trying to process what I just heard. Not guilty. All charges. I looked up and the foreman caught my eye. He gave me a subtle nod, and then I swear he winked. The noise subsided slightly. Mike, my boss, who had been sitting in the gallery, turned around and gave me a huge thumbs up. He came over as soon as the judge adjourned. "Congratulations, Peter. Told you it would work out. Take the rest of the week off. See you bright and early Monday morning." He shook my hand warmly. Friends and other supporters rushed over, offering hugs and congratulations. Even Leo, the superintendent, was there, grinning from ear to ear. He clapped me on the back, and then looking over towards where they were wheeling Tommy out, Leo subtly but unmistakably gave him the finger. Tommy's face, what little I could see of it past the bandages, was a mask of disbelief and impotent rage. Priceless. Feeling lighter than I had in months, I walked out of the courtroom with my lawyer, who was still beaming. As we passed the spot where they were maneuvering Tommy's wheelchair, I couldn't resist. I looked right at him and gave him the finger, just a little parting gift. He glared back, and for a second, I saw the old Tommy flicker in his eyes, the bully wanting desperately to lash out. But his mind was writing checks his broken body definitely couldn't cash anymore. A small satisfied smile touched my lips as I turned and walked away, a free man heading out into the sunshine. Just as I reached the end of the hallway, practically vibrating with relief, I noticed the jury foreman standing off to the side, seemingly waiting. He caught my eye and motioned for me to come over. "Hello, Mr. Huckey," he said quietly, extending his hand. "My name is Harry Peterson. Just wanted to say I'm glad you got off on all charges." "Thank you, Mr. Peterson," I replied, shaking his hand, a little surprised by his direct approach. "I appreciate that. Look," he continued, lowering his voice further, "like everyone else on the jury, I absolutely believed you were acting in self-defense. But on a more personal level, well, let's just say you never really had anything to worry about with me in that room. That's why I volunteered to be foreman. I wanted to make sure you walked free." He paused, then added significantly, "That video recording you had, it provided all the proof we needed." I was taken aback. Why would you go out of your way like that for me?" I asked, genuinely confused. He smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. Mr. Huckey, Peter, I was a year ahead of you back at Northwood High. My eyes widened. Northwood High? Yeah, he confirmed, seeing my recognition. Tommy Ballinger. He picked on me relentlessly, just like he did with you, until my mother finally pulled me out and transferred me to another school. He made my life an absolute misery for the entire time I was there. That stupid jerk bullied a lot of kids back then. He didn't recognize me during the trial, didn't remember me at all, but I remembered him. And I remembered watching what he used to do to you, Peter. He caught himself. He finally got exactly what he deserved after all these years. Anyway, Peter, best of luck in the future. Remember, he added with a final handshake and a wry grin, not all bullies win in the end. Just ask Tommy. He chuckled softly and walked away, leaving me stunned by the unexpected connection from the past. The twist didn't end there. Just as Harry Peterson disappeared down the hall, another figure approached me hesitantly. It was Rose. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face etched with worry and uncertainty. Peter, she began, her voice trembling slightly. Can we talk, please? I looked at her, at the woman I had once loved so completely, and felt less than nothing. Just a vast emptiness where love used to be replaced by the sharp, lingering pain of betrayal. No, Rose, I said flatly, my voice devoid of emotion. There's nothing left to talk about. You need to move on with your life. I know I'm going to. But Peter, I still love, she started. I know you think you do, Rose, I interrupted gently but firmly. And maybe a part of me still loves the woman I thought you were. But I can never love you again. Not after this. It hurts too much. The image of her with Tommy flashed in my mind again, visceral and sickening. I can't put it into words any better than that. Without waiting for a reply, I turned my back on her and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the courthouse hallway. That chapter was well and truly closed. The recording from my pocket device ended up being the linchpin of my defense, just as Harry Peterson had said. It captured everything crucial. You could hear Tommy mocking me, calling me Pissy Pete. You could clearly hear me telling him twice to get out of my apartment. Critically, you could hear Rose saying absolutely nothing during those moments, offering no objection to his presence, no support for my request for him to leave. The jury interpreted her silence as agreement with me that Tommy was an unwanted intruder. Then the recording captured Tommy's explicit threat and his physical attack on me. The video feed showed the initial struggle clearly right up until the moment I redirected his lunge and his head hit the doorframe. At that point, the recorder must have been knocked from my pocket, tumbling face down by the dresser, but the audio kept rolling. Later, after the fight was over and the police arrived, the audio captured Rose's panicked voice talking to the officers, immediately blaming me, claiming I started it all, that I just flew into a rage and beat up Tommy out of jealousy or revenge. But then, after the police briefly left her alone in the room, the recorder picked up something even more damning, Rose muttering to herself, trying to piece together a believable story, coaching herself on what lies she was going to tell me later. You could literally hear her constructing a false narrative on the fly. And nowhere in her panicked ramblings was there even a hint of remorse or sorrow for cheating on me. It was all about covering her own tracks. There was one final beautiful piece of poetic justice captured on that recording. It was Tommy's own idiotic bragging about being on the clock for the apartment complex while he was occupied with Rose. That little admission, his own words confirming he was performing non-work-related duties during work hours, completely torpedoed any chance he had of collecting workman's compensation or getting his massive medical bills covered by his employer's insurance. He was beaten broken and now completely shut out financially. Last I heard, after finally getting out of the hospital, he had to be shipped off to some long-term physical rehab facility out of town. They said he'd never be the same again physically or likely mentally. And the best part, his family was stuck footing the entire astronomical bill. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. So, fast forward to the following Monday morning. I walked back into the office feeling like a new man, acquitted, and ready to get back to work, as Mike had promised. I headed towards my old desk, but stopped short. All my stuff was gone. My heart sank for a second, wondering if Mike had changed his mind. But then I noticed my nameplate on the door of my former boss, Bill's much larger corner office. I pushed the door open. Sure enough, all my belongings were neatly arranged inside. My desk, my computer, my files. Mike hadn't just given me my job back. He'd given me Bill's old job. I was now my own boss, heading up my own design projects. Sweeter than sweet doesn't even begin to cover it. And that wasn't the only change. Suddenly, people around the office were looking at me differently, especially the women. It was bizarre. In my entire time at the company, I'd been practically invisible, just quiet Pete the engineer. Now, women were actually taking notice. In that first week back, no fewer than 4 different women approached me, striking up conversations, complimenting my work or my tie, and eventually asking me out on dates. They asked me out. Can you believe it? I couldn't figure it out at first until I overheard some chatter by the coffee machine. Apparently, our esteemed company president Mike, in his infinite wisdom, and perhaps as a way of smoothing my return, had been subtly spreading some rather colorful rumors about my background. The story going around was that I was actually some kind of retired Special Forces operative, maybe CIA, who did spy work for the government part-time, in between designing cost-effective building components. Seriously. And the women in the office, they were eating it up, hook, line, and sinker. Overnight, I'd gone from Pissy Pete the wimp to Pete Huckey, the mysterious, potentially dangerous ex-spy engineer. Go figure. I have to admit, I didn't exactly rush to correct the rumors. It added a certain intrigue to my daily routine. So that's how things settled down. Rose and I are divorced now, of course. The legal process was surprisingly smooth, thanks largely to Mike's excellent lawyer, and probably Rose's eagerness to just disappear. I have been seeing some women dipping my toes back into the dating pool. A few dates with colleagues who were suddenly intrigued by the ex-spy, a few with women I met outside of work. It's been okay, but if I'm honest, my heart isn't fully in it yet. I still miss Rose sometimes, or rather I miss the idea of her, the life I thought we had. But then the image of Tommy's hands on her, his presence in our bed flashes through my mind, and any lingering warmth instantly turns to ash. That thought alone is enough to ensure I never want to see her, let alone reconcile ever again. It feels strange to say it, but as I sit here telling you this, about 6 months have passed since I walked out of that courtroom a free man. Life, as they say, has a funny way of just turning the page sometimes when you least expect it. I've settled into my new role at work. Being my own boss is definitely an upgrade. The office still buzzes with those ridiculous rumors about my supposed Special Forces past. I haven't bothered correcting them. They provide a kind of amusing, if unintentional, layer of mystique to my professional life, and honestly, they don't hurt anyone. I moved out of that old apartment complex shortly after the trial. Too many ghosts, too many stained memories lingered in those rooms. My new place is a small loft downtown, lots of exposed brick, big industrial windows that flood the space with morning sunlight. It feels clean, minimalist, like a genuine fresh start. My martial arts training continues maybe even more dedicatedly than before, but the focus has shifted. It's less about self-defense or proving something now and more about peace, finding balance. Those sparring sessions at the gym have become my therapy. Each punch thrown, each kick landed on the heavy bag. Feels like a release, letting go of the residual anger and tension I hadn't even fully realized I was still carrying around. One Saturday morning a couple of months ago, I was grabbing coffee at a local spot near my loft. I had my notebook out, sketching some rough design ideas on a napkin. An old engineering habit I never quite kicked. The bell above the door jingled, announcing a new customer. I glanced up just out of habit. My blood ran cold. A man walked in, tall, still broad-shouldered, but moving with a noticeable limp. There was a stiffness in the way his left arm hung at his side. He turned, scanning the room, and my breath caught. The face was scarred now, the jawline slightly crooked like it hadn't healed quite right. But it was unmistakably him. Tommy Ballinger. Toothless Tommy. He wasn't in a wheelchair anymore, far from the bandaged wreck I'd last seen in court, but the marks of our encounter were clearly visible. Our eyes met across the small cafe. For a long second, everything just froze. I automatically braced myself, expecting that old surge of rage, the red mist. But it didn't come. Instead, a strange sense of calm washed over me. Tommy hesitated for a moment, then unbelievably he started walking towards my table. His expression was hard to read. Wary, maybe resigned. "Pete Huckey." He said, his voice rougher, raspier than I remembered. Probably permanent damage from the knee to the chest or the kick to the throat area. Didn't expect to run into you here. I leaned back deliberately in my chair, keeping my own voice carefully neutral. Tommy, you're looking mobile. I couldn't resist the small jab, but I kept my face impassive. He actually let out a short, dry laugh, though he winced slightly as he did. He surprised me again by sitting down across from me without asking. Yeah, he admitted, shifting uncomfortably. Took a while. Doc said I'd probably never walk right again after you. Well, after everything. Guess I proved him wrong on that one. I didn't say anything, just took a slow sip of my coffee, watching him waiting. The old bravado seemed to have faded, replaced by a weariness I'd never seen in him before. Look, Pete. He started, his gaze dropping to the table. I ain't here looking for trouble. I did a lot of thinking. Had nothing but time to think, stuck in that rehab place for months. He looked up, meeting my eyes. What I did to you back in school, and then, with your wife. It was messed up, royally messed up. I was a jerk, worse than a jerk. He took a deep breath. I don't expect you to forgive me. Hell, I wouldn't forgive me. But I figured I owed you an apology. I just stared at him, studying his face, searching for any hint of the old manipulative bully. He looked diminished, not just physically broken, but somehow smaller in spirit. An apology from Tommy Ballinger. It was the last thing I ever expected to hear. Part of me, the part that still carried the scars of Pissy Pete, wanted to spit it back in his face. But another part, the part that had spent years learning discipline, the part that understood the futility of clinging to old hatreds, knew it wouldn't change a damn thing. You made my life hell, Tommy. I said finally, my voice quiet but firm. More than once. You don't get to just wipe that slate clean with an I'm sorry. He nodded slowly, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. I know, he conceded. I'm not asking you to forget or forgive, just wanted to say it. He paused, then added, I'm leaving town next week. Got a line on a job in another state, something small. Trying to start over, Figured I should clear the air, such as it is, before I go. I was speechless for a moment. The Tommy I knew would never have admitted fault, let alone apologized or shown vulnerability. Maybe that brutal 2 minutes in my bedroom had broken more than just his bones. Maybe hitting rock bottom had forced him to finally see the person he'd been. Good luck with that, Tommy, I said, my voice flat, offering no warmth. Don't come back. He seemed to accept that. He stood up slowly, the limp more pronounced, as he pushed himself up. He gave me a single brief nod, then turned and walked out of the coffee shop, disappearing down the street. I watched him go, and as the door closed behind him, I felt a profound weight lift off my shoulders, a weight I hadn't even fully realized I was carrying. It wasn't forgiveness, not even close. But it was closure. A final unexpected closing of a chapter I thought would haunt me forever. For the first time in years, maybe ever, I felt truly free. Free from Tommy, free from the scared kid he created, free from the blindly trusting husband Rose betrayed, and free from the man who felt he had to prove his strength with violence. That evening, I went to the gym. I sparred harder and longer than I had in months. Not out of anger this time, but with a completely different kind of energy. Focused, controlled, constructive. I wasn't tearing anything down anymore. I was building something new. Things are looking up. My designs are getting noticed, winning contracts. Mike even hinted recently about a possible promotion, maybe leading a whole new design division the company is planning to launch. I've also started mentoring one of the young junior engineers, a shy, quiet kid who reminds me a lot of myself at that age. I find myself sharing some of the lessons I learned the hard way, including my dad's old advice, learn to control your temper, but never ever let anyone mistake your kindness for weakness. As for Rose, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she moved away to another city somewhere. Part of me hopes she finds some kind of peace, figures things out. But honestly, I don't dwell on it. My life is here now, focused on the present and the future, filled with new challenges, new projects, new faces. I'm not Pissy Pete anymore, and I'm not the guy who exploded with rage in that bedroom. I'm just Peter Huckey, and for the first time in a long time, maybe ever, that feels like enough. So, if you've listened to my whole story, thank you. Life's a messy, complicated business, full of twists and turns you never see coming. But every scar, every fight, every mistake, even every unexpected apology, It all becomes part of the road you travel. You learn, you adapt, you keep moving forward, and you try not to let the past define who you are today. If you've got a story of your own, maybe think about sharing it sometime. You never know who might be listening or how hearing it might change them. Take care.